This is channel Xianxia Audio. Please support me like a subscription. This is the series I'm Not a Theater God. Chapter 171. Headline. Morning. Chen Ling pushed open his room door, and a scent of plum blossom immediately wafted towards him, startling a few magpies on the eaves into flying up into the sky. For a moment, Chen Ling felt a bit dazed. Perhaps he had stayed in the 3rd district for too long. Instinctively assuming that opening the door would reveal a street full of wind and snow, but now he suddenly realized that the familiar, drafty, dilapidated little house was gone forever. Chen Ling had slept very well, sweeping away the fatigue of the past few days' travels. After clearing his head for a while at the door, he had just walked through the archway of the separate courtyard when he saw a figure sitting in front of the courtyard, holding a stack of newspapers and reading intently. Chu Muyan was still wearing his shirt and vest, with silver-rimmed glasses, and his reading posture was exactly the same as when he was in the 3rd district. This seemed to be his daily morning habit. "I thought you'd sleep in a bit longer." Chu Muyan glanced at him. "That's enough. I still have things to do." Chen Ling sat down on the stone chair opposite him and asked directly, "Is there any chaotic place in Aurora City?" Hearing this, Chu Muyan's expression was a little strange. He closed his book. "What are you trying to stir up now?" "What do you mean, now? I rarely stir things up." Chu Muyan said nothing, merely unfolding the newspaper in his hand onto the table. On the most prominent and largest page of the newspaper, several large, dark characters instantly caught Chen Ling's eye. "Heretic or justice? The first outsider in 100 years to crash through Aurora City's gates, Chen Ling. I question Aurora City." 3rd District Law Enforcement Officer Han Meng challenges the enforcement system. Twilight Society members reappear in Aurora City. Disaster or salvation? Interview record of 3rd District survivors, unveiling the darkness of bottom-tier enforcers and the distortion of human nature. 80% of today's Aurora Daily is about you. The entire city is arguing endlessly over your actions yesterday. In the past 100 years, no one has ever managed to do this. Chu Muyan looked at him deeply. "You are now a celebrity in Aurora City, and you say you rarely stir things up?" Chen Ling picked up the newspaper and flipped through it page by page. Chu Muyan was right. This newspaper was practically covered with photos of him from yesterday. The train bursting out of the wave of calamity, smashing through Aurora City's gate, his calm face while speaking inside the city, and his elegant exit in the flames at the end. The text content was almost entirely about him. The only content in this newspaper unrelated to him was the Constellation Commerce Association's alarm that sounded suddenly last night, indicating something had gone missing. However, this section was squeezed into the very corner, so much so that one wouldn't find it without looking carefully. "What Chen Ling does has nothing to do with me." Chen Ling pushed his half-rimmed glasses, answering indifferently. Chu Muyan's mouth twitched slightly. Just then, Chen Ling's gaze swept across the article at the very top, and a name suddenly caught his eye. "Who is this Wen Shailan?" Chen Ling asked, pointing to the small characters next to the headline. "Isn't it written there?" "Reporter." Chu Muyan paused, then continued. "This reporter seems to be somewhat famous, having exposed several dark dealings of enforcers behind the scenes, which also caused a sensation. These days, there aren't many reporters who dare to exercise media freedom." "Media freedom? What is that?" "It's a law established by the high-level officials during the early days of Aurora City's founding, when they were creating the enforcement system. Its purpose is to use media freedom to counterbalance the absolute enforcement power of the enforcers, serving as a form of supervision and inspection to prevent the power of enforcers or enforcement officers from becoming overly inflated." Chu Muyan chuckled. "But facts have proven that under an absolute power disparity, the media freedom of the common people is limited. After several hundred years, how many reporters still dare to use this right? Putting aside what benefits using this right could bring them, if they offend certain enforcers or enforcement officer groups, they wouldn't even know how they died. People are creatures that seek benefits and avoid harm. So who would still be willing to do such a thankless job?" "Media freedom, huh?" Chen Ling nodded thoughtfully. "First things first, where in Aurora City is chaotic?" After circling back, Chen Ling asked the same question again. Chu Muyan, after a moment of speechlessness, still reluctantly replied, "Aurora City is, after all, the core of the Aurora domain. So there aren't many overtly chaotic places. You can try looking around the outer ring in the west of the city. You might find what you're looking for there." Chen Ling got the information he wanted and was about to leave when Chu Muyan hesitated for a moment. Then added, "Oh, right, the people from your third district are also settled there." Chen Ling's footsteps paused slightly. Ellipsis. "Your name is?" "Zhao Yi." "All right, Mr. Zhao Yi." In the cramped room, a reporter held a pen and paper. Sitting by the window, "Let me introduce myself. I am Zhou Shuqing, a reporter from the Aurora Daily. I will be asking you a few questions, and I hope you will cooperate in answering." Zhao Yi was wrapped in bandages, his face already full of exhaustion. He frowned and asked, "Didn't you already have a reporter interview yesterday? Why are you asking again?" "My colleague yesterday might have misunderstood some things, so I'm here to confirm with you again." Zhou Shuqing's voice was as gentle as jade, very pleasant to listen to. "You mentioned in yesterday's interview that the enforcers in the 3rd district were collecting large protection fees from residents. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Approximately how much was this fee?" "At least 3 to 5 silver coins. Every month." "That amount doesn't sound like much." Hearing this, Zhao Yi subconsciously frowned. Before he could speak, Zhou Shuqing continued. "Then, after collecting this fee, did the district experience large-scale criminal cases or man-made terrorist attacks?" "That didn't happen, but then can it be understood that the enforcers, after collecting a small subsidy from the public, promptly expanded their manpower and updated their equipment, strengthening patrols, thereby preventing a series of malicious incidents from occurring?" Zhao Yi was stunned. He immediately stood up, shaking his head and saying, "No, it's not like that. That was protection money, not a subsidy." Zhou Shuqing seemed to ignore Zhao Yi's voice, merely lowering his head and writing rapidly on the paper. "You also mentioned that when the 3rd district was attacked by calamity, some enforcers not only failed to fulfill their duties but instead fled first, even rushing into private homes to coerce residents into hiding. But the calamity in the district was ultimately cleared, wasn't it?" "It was indeed cleared, but that had nothing to do with them. That was." "Then is it possible that what you saw as fleeing and hiding was merely a trap set by the enforcers to counter the calamity? And any accidental injuries caused to the public during this period were unintended during the struggle with the calamity?" Hearing this, Zhao Yi could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. His fists slowly clenched. Chapter 172 Wen Shailan. "You emphasized in your previous interview that your father was stabbed 13 times by an enforcer who was desperate to escape. Perhaps that enforcer was carrying out an important mission, and your father, being too afraid of death, was momentarily confused and tried to snatch the enforcer's weapon, thus being justifiably self-defended." "Son of a bitch!" Zhao Yi roared, his fist whistling towards Zhou Shuqing's face, but the latter lightly dodged it. "What kind of dogshit reporter are you? You're completely twisting the truth. I get it now. You're not here for an interview at all. You want to change our statements." Zhao Yi glared at him, wishing he could tear him to shreds. Zhou Shuqing finished writing the last word, closed his notebook, and spoke unhurriedly. "Mr. Zhao Yi, Aurora City has shown kindness and righteousness by choosing to shelter you refugees. Why must you bite the hand that feeds you and be ungrateful?" "Kindness and righteousness?" Zhao Yi was so angry his lungs felt like they would explode. He grabbed a stick from the corner of the table and swung it at Zhou Shuqing. The latter first retreated several steps out the door, then stood motionless, letting the stick hit him. Bang! Flashbulbs flickered, and as the camera shutter clicked, Zhou Shuqing cried out and fell to the ground. Zhao Yi was stunned. He looked up and saw an assistant already waiting outside the door, who had completely captured the scene with a camera. At the same time, other 3rd District survivors living in the tower also came downstairs upon hearing the commotion. "What's going on?" Xu Chongguo immediately asked. Zhao Yi, with wide eyes, recounted how Zhou Shuqing had twisted the facts. Everyone was instantly enraged, perhaps because they had experienced life and death together and supported each other in this unfamiliar territory. They had long become a united entity. At this moment, they all looked at Zhou Shuqing with fury. They're not pitiful refugees at all, just a group of malicious thugs. Zhou Shuqing slowly got up from the ground, stood beside his assistant, and smiled at everyone. "But in any case, thank you all for your cooperation. This time, we have enough material." The scene of Zhao Yi hitting someone had already been recorded by the camera, with some inflammatory text added. It could change public opinion. This was Zhou Shuqing's true purpose. "No, we can't just let him go." Xu Chongguo was an old hand after all. He immediately saw through Zhou Shuqing's plan. Quickly delete the photos from his camera. Seeing this, Zhao Yi was the first to rush out of the crowd, heading straight for the assistant beside Zhou Shuqing. Zhou Shuqing and his assistant took a step back, and figures began to emerge one after another from the dilapidated alleyways around the tower. Those figures wore crumpled clothes and held sticks. They were thugs found from who knows where, each with a sinister and ruthless expression. They now stood behind Zhou Shuqing and his assistant, coldly looking at Zhao Yi and the others. Seeing this scene, Xu Chongguo's heart sank. The other party had come prepared this time. Zhou Shuqing, what are you doing? Just as the two sides were in a standoff, a voice suddenly came from the side. Zhou Shuqing's face darkened when he heard the voice. He looked to the other side of the alley and saw Wen Xiaolan, also with an assistant, frowning and looking at the scene. Isn't this our great reporter Wen? Zhou Shuqing sneered. What? Was the uproar caused by yesterday's article not big enough? Do you want to meddle again? Wen Xiaolan's gaze swept over the 3rd District residents surrounded by the thugs, and a hint of anger flashed in his eyes. He extended his hand towards Zhou Shuqing. Give me the camera. Why should I? Aren't you afraid of retribution for using such despicable means to whitewash those people? Retribution? Zhou Shuqing chuckled. Don't worry. If there truly is retribution in this world, then some people will die faster than me. Seeing that Zhou Shuqing was unyielding, Wen Xiaolan also became genuinely angry. He coldly swept his gaze over the thugs protecting Zhou Shuqing, then calmly began to roll up his sleeves. I didn't want to resort to force, but since you won't hand it over, don't blame me. Wen Xiaolan said indifferently. Cheng, get ready to move. The assistant beside him also began to roll up his sleeves. The two stood in the center of the deserted alleyway, a cold wind blowing through their clothes, creating a solemn and biting atmosphere. This posture truly intimidated the thugs. They subconsciously took half a step back, clenching the sticks in their hands. Their gazes filled with vigilance as they looked at the two. Even Zhou Shuqing, hiding behind them, changed his expression, as if facing a formidable enemy. He retreated several steps. It was then that he noticed a young man in a brown coat and half-rimmed glasses leaning against the wall not far behind him. Squinting at the scene, Zhou Shuqing didn't know when that person had arrived, and he didn't have time to pay attention to a passerby right now, because Wen Xiaolan and his assistant had already clenched their fists and were charging straight at him. The two of them had an imposing aura, especially Wen Xiaolan. Although he looked delicate, there was an unyielding fighting spirit in his eyes. Boss, this one's tough. Remember to add more money? As the strong wind stirred by Wen Xiaolan's approaching figure neared, the leading thug gritted his teeth and said to Zhou Shuqing, then braced himself and swung his iron rod with all his might at Wen Xiaolan's figure. Bang! Wen Xiaolan fell to the ground in response. Thug. The thug was a bit stunned. He hadn't even realized what had happened. He only knew that he seemed to have swung a stick casually. And then Wen Xiaolan tried to dodge, but his speed couldn't keep up at all. He was hit squarely on the forehead by the stick, his eyes rolling back as he fell to the ground on the spot. So, all that impressive aura was just for a combat power of less than 5 at the end? On the other hand, Cheng, the assistant, did have some skill. He fought with 2 thugs for a few rounds. But in the end, he was also hit on the back of the head with a blunt object and fell beside Wen Xiaolan. In the back of the alley, the young man in the brown coat couldn't help but rub his forehead, seemingly unable to bear the sight of the scene. Chen Ling had arrived much earlier. He originally just wanted to find a chaotic place to test his Xin Mang, and came by to check on the situation in the 3rd District. As a result, he witnessed the entire process of Zhao Yi chasing Zhou Shuqing out the door and being caught on camera. At first, Chen Ling was still hesitating whether to intervene. But then Wen Xiaolan appeared. He initially thought he wouldn't be needed and that Wen Xiaolan could handle it, even looking forward to seeing the rumored reporter's skills. But then he saw the other party get knocked down in one move like a little chicken. With just that little bit of skill, how did he manage to build up such an impressive aura? And where was your fist of justice? Chen Ling complained inwardly, while Zhou Shuqing beside him burst out laughing. I say, Wen Xiaolan, are you here to be funny? Chapter 173, Stealing Emotions. Zhou Shuqing had finally seen Wen Xiaolan's true strength. He casually took an iron rod from a nearby thug and slowly walked towards the groaning Wen Xiaolan. who was lying on the ground. Wen Xiaolin, do you know how many people you've offended? There are so many people in Aurora City who want you dead right now. Maybe in a couple of days, the newspaper will report your accidental death. If I'm lucky, I might even get to write your obituary myself. The iron rod scraped across the uneven ground. Clanking, Wen Xiaolin lay on the ground, his face covered in crimson blood. Is that so? Then I'll thank you in advance, he said hoarsely, struggling to lift his head. You don't believe me? Zhou Shuqing stopped beside Wen Xiaolin and continued. Aurora City must be peaceful and beautiful. Any existence that wants to unearth its deepest darkness is an enemy of the entire realm. You've dug too much, known too much, and your mouth isn't tight. If you don't die, how can Aurora City be peaceful? Of course, I believe it. I know better than you who I've offended. Wen Xiaolin grinned, but it won't be easy for them to kill me. Zhou Shuqing scoffed. With your skills, what's the difference between killing you and killing a chicken? Is that so? A hint of cunning flashed in Wen Xiaolin's eyes. He suddenly propped himself up with both hands, swinging a taut fist that whistled through the air, aiming it at Zhou Shuqing, who was right in front of him. Wen Xiaolin's sudden outburst was too unexpected because everyone had been fooled by his apparent fragility when he was knocked down by a single blow. They had no idea he could get up so quickly. And at such close range, Zhou Shuqing had no time to block. Bang! With a muffled thud, Wen Xiaolin's fist landed heavily on Zhou Shuqing's cheek, sending him staggering back several steps, almost falling to the ground. Seeing this, Chen Ling's eyebrows raised slightly. It is indeed an ordinary skill. The strength and speed are just mediocre. But Wen Xiaolin struggled to steady himself, his blood-stained face showing a rare resoluteness and determination. However, the spiritual power contained in this punch was quite good. Wen Xiaolin's punch completely stunned the surrounding thugs. They looked blankly at Zhou Shuqing, unsure whether they should help him. Zhou Shuqing clutched his cheek, his lips trembling uncontrollably. He seemed to feel something foreign in his mouth. After chewing for a moment, he spat out a mouthful, and a bloody broken tooth landed on the ground. He froze for a long while, looking at Wen Xiaolin with eyes that seemed to spit fire. Beat him. At Zhou Shuqing's command, the thugs who had been waiting rushed forward. In a chaotic scene, sticks and fists surrounded Wen Xiaolin, raining down on him. Wen Xiaolin knew he was no match for so many people. He skillfully squatted down, protecting his head and vital parts with his hands, letting himself be beaten like a sandbag, emitting muffled groans of pain. Let him go. Damn it, let's fight them. Seeing this, the people from the 3rd district immediately rushed over. After all, Wen Xiaolin had come to stand up for them, and they couldn't just stand by while he was being beaten. Zhao Yi was originally a thug from the 3rd district, and he was best at group brawls. At this moment, he picked up a brick from the roadside and charged fiercely at the thugs. Leading the way, a bunch of rioters, Zhou Shuqing said grimly. Everyone, attack. These thugs and the survivors from the 3rd district started fighting, and the scene immediately descended into chaos. Zhou Shuqing retreated behind the thugs, coldly watching the two sides brawl. At the same time, Chen Ling's eyes narrowed slightly. To be honest, he didn't really want to get involved in the 3rd district's affairs anymore. He had done his part by bringing these people into the city. As for how they survived in the city, it was none of his business. After all, he wasn't their nanny. However, this chaotic situation was exactly what Chen Ling wanted. One of his goals in the outer ring was to find an opportunity to test the heart serpent skill. And now seemed to be a good time to act. He wondered to what extent he, who was only at tier 2, could use the heart serpent. Chen Ling locked his gaze on Zhou Shuqing, who had retreated from the battlefield. His fingers in his sleeve hooked lightly, and an invisible serpent emerged from his glabella, moving directly towards Zhou Shuqing. This invisible serpent was the concretization of the heart serpent. No one but Chen Ling could see it. It silently coiled around Zhou Shuqing, its head examining Zhou Shuqing's head, its tongue flicking slightly, as if observing something. With a thought, Chen Ling commanded the heart serpent to suddenly bite into Zhou Shuqing's mind. As Chen Ling narrowed his eyes, he could see a few faint threads being pulled out by the heart serpent. Those should have been Zhou Shuqing's most recent memories. But no matter how hard the heart serpent tried, it couldn't extract them. With his current mental power, he couldn't steal memories, not even a small fragment. The heart serpent tried for a long time, only biting off a piece of the outer layer of the memory threads. At the same time, Zhou Shuqing suddenly trembled. He looked at the chaotic battlefield in the distance, the anger in his eyes vanishing, replaced by a bewildered and astonished calm. He stared blankly down at his hands, unsure of what had happened. I still can't steal memories, but I can steal emotions? Chen Ling raised an eyebrow in surprise, looking at the fragment in the heart serpent's mouth. In Chen Ling's eyes, Zhou Shuqing's mind was like a physical body. Memories were similar to flesh and blood, and the emotions he had just bitten off were the skin attached to immediate memories. Beneath the flesh and blood of memory, there were some deeper things, like bones, but Chen Ling couldn't yet see their full form. Initially, Chen Ling was worried that with his current rank, he might not be able to use the high-level skill, Heart Serpent, at all. Now it seemed this was not the case. Even if he could only steal emotions at this stage, Chen Ling had already thought of countless extended uses. He had a hunch that this skill would be highly compatible with him. Chen Ling pondered for a moment, then walked directly towards Zhou Shuqing and patted him on the shoulder from behind. Zhou Shuqing turned his head, saw a young, unfamiliar face, and instinctively frowned. He said coldly, "Who are you? I advise you not to meddle." Bang! Before Zhou Shuqing could finish his sentence, a fist whistled through the air and slammed heavily into the other side of his face. Chapter 174, Playing with Hearts. This punch was much heavier than Wen Shilan's earlier feeble one, directly sending Zhou Shuqing sprawling to the ground with a dull thud. Stunning everyone who was still fighting, their gazes filled with shock as they looked over. Cough, 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 cough. Zhou Shuqing lay twisted on the ground, coughing painfully, first spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, and then starting to spit out teeth. 1, 2, 3. Zhou Shuqing couldn't utter a single word, having already spit out 4 or 5 teeth, basically. The teeth on half of his cheek were broken, one side of his cheek was visibly swollen and red, and his features began to contort from the pain. He looked up at the stranger in the brown coat in front of him, his eyes filled with deep bewilderment. Zhou Shuqing didn't recognize this person at all, nor did he know why he would suddenly punch him. Even now, he was still completely stunned. He stumbled to his feet from the ground, and in his gradually clearing eyes, an unprecedented fury began to ignite. He tremblingly pointed at Chen Ling, his gaze wishing he could tear him to shreds. Just as he was about to say something, Chen Ling's eyes narrowed slightly, and the invisible heart serpent wrapped around Zhou Shuqing's body took another bite at his head. Zhou Shuqing froze in place. The raging anger that had just erupted suddenly vanished. At this moment, he was engulfed in an unprecedented emptiness and melancholy. He looked at Chen Ling, whose eyes were filled with amusement and curiosity, yet he couldn't muster even a hint of anger. He was like a ruthless monk who had cultivated for 10 years in the mountains, and one day returned to the mortal world, seeing his enemy again, with only peace remaining in his heart. He had let go. The surrounding gang members had already tensed up, waiting for Zhou Shuqing's command to swarm forward and teach this stranger a lesson. But they looked at Zhou Shuqing expectantly for a long time, only for him to speak casually. "Who are you? I don't seem to know you." Open black lens bracket audience expectation +3 close black lens bracket. When this sentence came out, everyone was stunned. Wen Shilan couldn't believe his ears. After he threw that punch, Zhou Shuqing wanted someone to beat him to death. But this stranger almost knocked out half of his teeth with one punch. And now he wasn't even angry at all? Could it be that he had misjudged? Was this Zhou Shuqing actually a very magnanimous person? Everyone looked at Chen Ling in shock. In their understanding, after Chen Ling threw that punch, the originally arrogant Zhou Shuqing suddenly became unusually docile, not even daring to utter a single curse word. The only explanation was that Zhou Shuqing already knew and feared Chen Ling, but he explicitly said he didn't know him. Or was it that Chen Ling's punch was too brutal, directly scaring him into submission? Considering everything, this seemed to be the most reasonable explanation. "Just passing by," Chen Ling replied indifferently. "Passing by? Why did you hit me?" "What you did was too disgusting. I couldn't help it." Zhou Shuqing shook his head and replied earnestly, "What you're doing is wrong. Whether it's right or wrong, you don't get to decide." Chen Ling glanced at him. "Or do you want me to hit you again?" "No." "Then get lost." Zhou Shuqing's gaze swept over the crowd behind him, and the light of reason flickered in his eyes. He had already gotten what he wanted. And Wen Xiaolin had been taught a lesson. So there seemed to be no reason to stay here. He pondered for a moment before speaking. Forget it, let's go. Under the dumbfounded gazes of everyone, Zhou Shuqing turned and walked towards the end of the alley. Without the slightest hesitation. These gang members holding sticks were instantly dumbfounded. Before coming, Zhou Shuqing had told them to teach these people a lesson. Now that the fight had started, and they were about to win, he got punched and then turned around saying he wanted to leave? If they just left like this, not only would the beating they just took be for nothing, but if people found out they were scared off by refugees, they would lose face. The other gang members looked at the one in charge with blank expressions, seemingly waiting for his command. After a moment of hesitation, he gritted his teeth and followed Zhou Shuqing. Once closer, he lowered his voice and asked, "Boss, what's going on? Let's be clear, the brothers have already fought to this point, so we won't be getting a refund if we leave now." Just as Zhou Shuqing was about to say something, Chen Ling's mind stirred. The heart serpent, which had swallowed all of Zhou Shuqing's anger, opened its mouth slightly and spat the anger back into Zhou Shuqing's mind. Zhou Shuqing looked at the frowning gang leader, and an inexplicable surge of malicious anger welled up in his heart. What Chen Ling had stolen was the anger Zhou Shuqing felt after he had knocked out a few of his teeth with that punch, which was on a completely different level from the anger caused by Wen Xiaolin's soft blow. As this rage returned to his mind, his eyes instantly turned red. Clap. He couldn't help but slap the gang leader across the face, making a crisp sound, and roared furiously. "What are you? When I tell you to go, you go. What are you talking about?" The air suddenly fell into a dead silence. Open black lens bracket audience expectation +3 close black lens bracket. The many gang members following behind were first stunned by this scene. Then, upon realizing what happened, anger simultaneously appeared on their faces. They immediately rushed forward and surrounded Zhou Shuqing and his assistant. The gang leader's head was buzzing from the slap, and after a long while, he looked at Zhou Shuqing in shock. "You?" After slapping and venting some of his anger, Zhou Shuqing's rationality returned somewhat. He looked at his hands blankly, his mind a complete blank. He had been completely dominated by the sudden surge of anger just now. Completely unaware of what he was doing, just like most criminals who commit non-premeditated murder. They are often blinded by some emotion during the act. "Damn it, for your stinking money, I have to put up with this?" The gang leader couldn't take it anymore and cursed loudly. "Beat him to death, boys." At his command, the many gang members immediately rushed forward and violently beat Zhou Shuqing and his assistant. Amidst screams, Zhou Shuqing was beaten beyond recognition. Open black lens bracket audience expectation +1, +1, +1, close black lens bracket. This inexplicable reversal left the residents of the 3rd District and Wen Xiaolin a bit bewildered. They didn't understand Zhou Shuqing's unpredictable temper, but seeing him being violently beaten by the gang members he himself had hired, they felt incredibly satisfied. Bang! The flash of the spotlight illuminated the alley. Chen Ling had, at some unknown point, obtained Zhou Shuqing's camera and pressed the shutter, pointing it at the chaotic alley. In the flickering light, the film eternally captured Zhou Shuqing's miserable state. After this, Chen Ling casually tossed the camera, which still contained the footage of Zhao Yi beating people, to Wen Xiaolin, and turned to walk towards the other end of the alley. He calmly walked through the noisy, enraged crowd of gang members, adjusting his collar, which had become slightly disheveled from the punch he had thrown. In the shadows of the alley, the corners of his mouth curved slightly upwards. The power to manipulate hearts, interesting. Chapter 175, Heart. The people of the 3rd District looked at the departing figure, their eyes filled with confusion. Who was that person? Do you know him? How would we know him? We only arrived yesterday. Look at his clothes and his style. He's clearly a native of Aurora City. What connection could we possibly have with him? But that punch he threw just now was so cool. He seemed really strong. He's alright, but not as cool as Chief Chen. No matter what, he did help us out. If we ever meet him again, we must thank him properly. The mysterious man suddenly appeared, punched Zhou Shuqing, and then calmly left. During this process, he didn't exchange a single word with them, as if he truly was just a righteous passerby. So, there really are good people like that in Aurora City? Wen Xiaolin, clutching the camera Chen Ling had dropped, wobbled to his feet. his mouth twitching wildly in pain. Those thugs had been too ruthless. If it weren't for his good protective measures and the mysterious man's sudden intervention, he probably would have broken at least a few bones. Cheng, are you alright? Wen Xiaolin walked over and pulled up his assistant. Didn't you tell me you were a good fighter during your interview? How did you get knocked down so easily? Cheng said with a tearful face. Sir, I can fight, but that's all I can do. Fighting 3 of them was already my limit. And they ambushed me. How was I supposed to fight? Are your injuries serious? Not serious, just superficial wounds. Cheng saw the camera in Wen Xiaolin's hand and suddenly asked. Sir, do you know that person? No, I don't. Then why did he give you the camera? Wen Xiaolin looked in the direction Chen Ling had left, and shook his head. I don't know, but he was probably thinking of these refugees in the 3rd district. In this day and age, there aren't many people who would draw their swords to help when they see injustice. It's a pity he left too quickly. Otherwise, I definitely would have gotten to know him. We're all in Aurora City. Maybe we'll have a chance to meet again next time. Wen Xiaolin hummed, perhaps. By the time the thugs had finished venting, the sun was already setting. The gang leader, panting, looked at the 2 half-dead figures on the ground, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and then spat fiercely onto the bloody ground. I gave you face. I took your money and did the job properly. And this is how you treat me? So what if you have some money? How unlucky. The gang leader waved his hand. Take out their wallets. A group of subordinates immediately stepped forward, almost stripping Zhou Shuqing and his assistant Bear, finally producing a bulging wallet and handing it to the gang leader. Boss, it's all here. The gang leader flipped through it. Hey, these reporters, they're quite well off. After speaking, he pulled out a few silver notes from it, then threw the remaining money in the wallet onto Zhou Shuqing, and coldly said, let's go. Boss, we're only taking this much? A subordinate's eyes turned red when he saw the thick stack of silver notes in the wallet. The gang leader slapped him across the face. We're not damn robbers. The appearance fee is what it is. We need to have credibility when we're out in the world. Understand? With that, he led his subordinates away with a swagger. About 10 minutes later, they arrived in front of a dilapidated factory building and pushed the door open. This was their stronghold. At least that's what they called it. There were about 40 or 50 of them, and they basically ate, drank, and slept here. To put it nicely, they were unemployed here. To put it bluntly, they were a bunch of people who spent all day playing cards and drinking. The good news was that they had landed a big job today. If nothing went wrong, it should be enough for each of them to splurge for a few days. Just as they were about to start celebrating, the flame of the kerosene lamp flickered slightly. In the dim light, a figure had already appeared like a ghost at the factory entrance. It was a young man in a brown overcoat, wearing a pair of half-rimmed glasses on his nose. The lenses reflected the flickering kerosene lamp, casting an uncertain light on his calm face. At this moment, he stood with his hands in his pockets, surveying the dilapidated factory building before him. So, you guys are the dark forces of the outer ring? Chen Ling's voice seemed a little disappointed. The sudden appearance of the figure startled everyone in the factory. They immediately grabbed the weapons at hand. And when they saw that the person standing at the entrance was the one who had just punched Zhou Shuqing unconscious, the vigilance in their eyes grew even stronger. Friend, the gang leader stepped forward and said in a deep voice, if you're looking for trouble with that reporter, he's not here. I'm not looking for him. I'm looking for you. Looking for us? The gang leader's eyes narrowed slightly. We don't seem to have offended you. Or are you trying to stand up for those refugees? I'm not that bored. I just wanted to ask. What kind of services do you offer here? Services. The gang leader was stunned. So this person came to hire them as thugs? Our service capabilities are very strong. He immediately corrected himself. As long as the price is right, we can be on standby at any time. I just don't know who you plan to deal with. I'm not talking about that kind of service. Chen Ling paused for a moment. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold wind swept into the factory with his voice, making the kerosene lamp on the table shake violently. Can you kill people? Kill people? The gang leader's face changed, and he said decisively, no, we don't kill people. Is that so? What about organ trafficking? The gang leader's face grew even uglier. We don't do organ trafficking either. with 2 consecutive questions. The other subordinates also started to panic a bit. This young man looked refined. But why was everything he said so horrifying? They were just a group of unemployed vagrants who liked to drink and fight. They wouldn't dare touch such things. If you don't have any of these things, then why are you acting like dark forces? Chen Ling tutted. Then do you know where one can trade organs? No, we don't know. The gang leader spoke without hesitation. Friend, we didn't intend to offend you today. We truly don't have the services you're looking for. And no one in the entire outer ring would dare to do that kind of business. Chen Ling frowned, deep in thought. That shouldn't be. How could there be none? The gang leader hesitated for a moment, but couldn't suppress his curiosity, and cautiously asked, "What do you need these places for?" "To find something." "What?" Chen Ling smiled slightly, in the flickering dim candlelight. His smile was cold and eerie. My heart. Chapter 176. Name. The kerosene lamp in the factory suddenly went out. At this moment, all the gang members present widened their eyes, staring intently at the figure standing in the dim moonlight. His half-rimmed glasses reflected the chilling moonlight, like a demon from the underworld. Their hearts seemed to skip a beat. Your heart? The gang leader swallowed. Oh, Chen Ling seemed to find that statement too horrifying, so he changed his reason. I mean, my brother's heart. Hearing this, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Right, if a person didn't have a heart, how could he possibly be standing there talking to them? It made more sense if it was his brother's. Chen Ling hadn't forgotten that his chest was still empty, although he didn't know if he could put his heart back if he found it. At least he needed to know where his heart went. What's more, the culprit who stole his heart and killed Chen Yan was hidden in Aurora City. So when Chen Ling asked Chu Muyan where was more chaotic, on one hand, he wanted to test the Xin Mang, and on the other hand, he wanted to find an underground trading place similar to Bingchen Street. Maybe he could find clues about the buyer of his heart. The gang leader's gaze towards Chen Ling held less wariness and more sympathy. From Chen Ling's few words, he could already guess that something extremely dark and cruel must have happened to Chen Ling. If his own relative had their heart taken, he would probably go mad searching for it and then seeking revenge. I'm sorry, we don't know where such a trade exists, he said helplessly. Chen Ling watched the gang leader for a moment, sighing inwardly. He could tell this man wasn't lying. It seemed these were indeed ordinary hooligans. Compared to the truly vicious criminal organizations, they were like gentle, harmless lambs. He pondered for a moment, looking at the dozens of hoodlums and gang members in front of him, and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Since that's the case, you can investigate for me. These gang members idled around Aurora City all day, so they should be far more familiar with everything here than he was. And they associated with people from the lower strata of society. If he developed them into informants, it should have a good effect. Us? The gang leader was stunned for a moment. It's not impossible. But we don't charge cheap. Price is not an issue. Seeing this, the gang leader's eyes immediately lit up. This was a big fish. We require a 10% down payment in advance. There is none. Quote. Ellipsis. Question mark quote. Owe it to me. I'll pay it all after the job is done. Chen Ling waved his hand, not caring at all. Chen Ling had just arrived in Aurora City and was penniless. How could he afford a deposit? Although borrowing money from Chu Muyan was an option, he didn't want to owe him a favor. The gang leader stared intently at Chen Ling, his expression somewhat displeased. He began to suspect if Chen Ling was here to cause trouble. But he didn't seem like it. Moreover, they couldn't guarantee they could find clues about organ trading, as they had never heard of such a thing in Aurora City. He hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. Payment afterwards is also fine, but the price will have to increase. And we don't guarantee we can find anything. Also, you should know what will happen if you can't pay when the time comes. Chen Ling naturally heard the threat in his words and smiled slightly. No problem. Chen Ling was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something and turned back. Besides that, help me investigate someone else. This shouldn't be difficult for you, right? Who? Wen Shilin. Chen Ling slowly spoke. I want all his past records, personal preferences, daily habits, and all other information. The price will be calculated separately. That's not hard, but why do you want information on a mere reporter? You don't need to concern yourself with that. Quote. Ellipsis. All right, the gang leader shrugged. What should I call you? Boss? Chen Ling paused. He almost subconsciously blurted out the name Chen Ling. But then he remembered that he was operating in Aurora City under a completely new identity. So his name naturally had to change. He was silent for a moment, then slowly uttered 2 words. Lin Yan. Ellipsis. Constellation Commerce Association. Has that Jian Chongqing been brought back? A figure draped in expensive mink fur hurried into the room, speaking with a grim expression. In the main hall of the Commerce Association, a group of figures exchanged glances and silently lowered their heads. So many of you, and you can't even keep an inmate in a dungeon? What are you all good for? The figure burst into a rage, picked up a teapot from the table, and smashed it to the ground. Shards flew, cutting several people's faces. Young master, that Jian Chongqing is too strange. So many of us saw him disappear into thin air. This is simply illogical. Yes, young master. The guards watched the courtyard inside and out all night, and didn't find anything unusual. This Jian Chongqing is the first stage of the open black lens bracket Asura close black lens bracket path, with only the open black lens bracket blood clothes close black lens bracket skill. Logically, he shouldn't have been able to escape at all. Quote. Ellipsis. Quote. The people below spoke one after another, their words becoming increasingly fantastical. They still couldn't understand how Jian Chongqing could escape on his own. Yet there were no traces of anyone else helping him break out. Besides, Jian Chongqing had been a servant of their Yan family since childhood. With no status or background, who could come to rescue him? According to you, this commerce association is haunted? Young Master Yan Qisho pointed at the servants below, scolding, if father comes back and hears about this, every single one of you will be beaten half to death. You incompetent dogs? The old butler stood at the very front, his body slightly bowed, and spoke calmly. Young master, please rest assured, as long as Jian Chongqing is still in Aurora City, we will find him sooner or later. Seeing the old butler speak, Yan Qishu's expression softened slightly. This old butler, nearly 70 years old, had been assisting the Constellation Commerce Association since his father's generation. Although he was now the young master of the Constellation Commerce Association, he still didn't dare to be too arrogant in front of him. Uncle Long, can we get the enforcers to issue a warrant? Quote. Ellipsis. No, we cannot. The old butler shook his head. Firstly, in the enforcer system's archives, Jian Chongqing is already a dead man, otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed us to torment him. Since he's a dead man, he cannot be wanted. Secondly, if this matter becomes too big, it might also harm the reputation of our Constellation Commerce Association. Yan Qisho paced anxiously in the main hall, his hands behind his back. This matter must be resolved before father returns. Have all our men been sent out? They have been sent out and are conducting a city-wide carpet search. The old butler paused for a moment. I've also arranged for people to stake out all the relatives connected to Jian Chongqing. Once he shows his face, he won't be able to escape. Chapter 177. Starting with killing a dog and taking its den. West City, Outer Ring. A figure peeked out from a dilapidated street corner. On his face, covered in stains and mud, a pair of eyes quickly scanned the surroundings. After confirming no one was passing by, he suddenly rushed towards the trash can across the street. He reached the trash can, swiftly tied up the entire garbage bag, and carried it in his hand, then quickly rushed back to his original corner. With eyes green from hunger, he frantically tore open the garbage bag and rummaged through it like a wild dog. Seeing half a leftover piece of bread, he didn't care about the black liquid. Whatever it was, stuck to it, and stuffed it all into his mouth. He gnawed greedily and madly at everything edible, like an animal that hadn't eaten for days, making chewing sounds only a beast would make. His pale, emaciated body was curled up in the dark corner. From afar, he looked like a jackal that could be scattered by the wind at any moment. This was Jian Chongqing's first meal in over 10 days. Ever since he was discovered in Winterport and sent to the Constellation Commerce Association, he hadn't been able to eat a single bite. After all, the people in the association didn't intend for him to live. They all adopted the attitude that he would be annihilated after one soul fragmentation search evidence. No one would think of giving him food. Even if the Constellation Commerce Association was wealthy, it wouldn't waste resources on a corpse. Unfortunately, he didn't die after one search. nor after 2. After enduring the 3rd time, Xianxia was thrown into the dungeon. Forgotten, if not for the powerful vitality granted by the blood clothes, Xianxia would have starved to death in the dungeon. However, the mental pain brought by the soul fragmentation search evidence also hollowed out his physical body. In one desperate struggle after another, his fat and muscles were rapidly consumed. After 3 searches, his weight was less than 80 pounds, essentially skin and bones. Xianxia ate half a piece of bread, a rotten apple, and a few yellowed vegetable leaves in one go. Only then did the extreme hunger subside slightly. Just then, he heard a clamor of people from the street in the distance. As if someone was approaching, his body instantly tensed, and he pressed himself against the wall, hiding in a blind spot, his eyes flickering with murderous intent and vigilance. However, those people didn't seem to notice him. After searching around the street, they left directly into the distance. To catch me, they've gone to such great lengths? Xianxia muttered, listening to the receding footsteps. Xianxia grew up in the Constellation Commerce Association, so he was very aware of how much power they wielded in Aurora City. Any place with people could potentially have their informants, so he could only constantly avoid crowds and move in uninhabited, confined spaces. But how long could he hide like this? He couldn't live this fugitive life forever. If his life after surviving was going to be like this, he would rather have been killed by Chen Ling in the Bingdao ancient treasury. But where could he go now? In Xianxia's mind, his father's figure immediately appeared. He had narrowly escaped death, and his father probably still thought he was dead. He wondered how his father was living alone. Xianxia urgently wanted to go home and see him, but very quickly, he rejected this idea. His father was originally a servant of the Yan family. After his escape, those people would undoubtedly keep a close watch around his home. If he returned, it would be walking straight into a trap. Xianxia's mind raced, recalling all the people he could trust in Aurora City, and finally settled on one figure. Now, he could only rely on him. Xianxia hid in the corner, closing his eyes to rest, until darkness fell and there were almost no pedestrians on the road. Then he opened his eyes and moved. He agilely climbed onto the surrounding rooftops, using the cover of night to move like a phantom between eaves and walls, silently sweeping across several streets, finally landing near a certain house. Xianxia didn't rush into the house. Instead, he hid in the corner of the street opposite, cautiously scanning the surroundings with his gaze, seemingly confirming whether anyone was ambushing him in the dark. Just then, the door of the house opened, and a figure, carrying several bags of trash, walked directly towards the trash can opposite. The moment he saw that figure, Xianxia's eyes lit up slightly. As that figure approached, Xianxia, hiding not far away, lowered his voice and called softly, "Uncle." That figure froze, his gaze instinctively turning towards him. When he saw Xianxia, covered in stains and messy, he was stunned for a long moment, and surprise appeared in his eyes. He didn't speak in reply, but calmly continued to throw the trash into the trash can, while subtly shaking his head at Xianxia, his gaze drifting towards his house behind him. Seeing this, Xianxia seemed to understand something, and his face turned incredibly grim. Those people from the Constellation Commerce Association, they even found this place? The owner of this house was Xianxia's maternal uncle, who had watched him grow up. However, ever since his mother died and his father took him into the Yan family, their two families had no more contact. Logically, those people from the Yan family shouldn't have seen them before. Yet, even so, informants had been placed here, and they were extremely well hidden. They must have calculated that he would come here and planned to wait for him. If he hadn't happened to run into his uncle coming out to throw trash, he probably would have been caught already. A cold sweat broke out on Xianxia's back. He remained motionless in the corner, watching his uncle finish throwing the trash and turn back into the house. As the light from the door crack completely disappeared, Xianxia felt as if the last ray of light in his life had also vanished. He smiled bitterly, despair appearing in his eyes. Just then, the door opened again, and his uncle came out with 2 new bags of trash. "Why are you throwing trash again?" His aunt's surprised voice came from inside the house. "These things are expired, they'll attract bugs if left here," his uncle replied from the doorway, and walked straight across the street, placing the 2 bags of trash next to the trash can. Immediately after, he looked up in Xianxia's direction and whispered softly. Xiao Jian, Uncle's house is being watched. You'll have to make do outside for a while. There's some stuff here that'll last you a few days. If you really have nowhere to stay. There's a dog den under the barren hill at the west end of the street. Although the environment is harsh, at least it can shield you from the wind and rain. After quickly saying this, his uncle turned and went back inside. Xianxia watched this scene blankly, a warmth appearing in his eyes. Xiao Jian, he hadn't heard that address in a long time. Xianxia looked around, and seeing no one, he picked up the 2 trash bags and followed his uncle's directions to the foot of the barren hill. In the dense, uninhabited woods, a wooden dog den indeed stood. This dog den must have been left by the original owner of the house next door. But after they moved, it was completely abandoned. Now, a wild dog, whose origin was unknown, was lying prostrate inside. It seemed to have heard Xianxia's arrival and stood up cautiously, emitting low growls from its throat. Xianxia stared blankly at this scene, suddenly feeling a sense of inexplicable desolation. He had never imagined that one day he would have to fight with a wild dog for a place to live, and search for food in a trash can. His life and dignity had already fallen lower than a wild dog's. He couldn't go home, and he had talent but nowhere to use it. And all of this was thanks to the Constellation Commerce Association. Xianxia took a deep breath, loosened the 2 trash bags, and slowly walked towards the wild dog. On his pale face, a murderous hatred emerged. His life had hit rock bottom, no matter what. It couldn't get any worse than this. As long as he lived, he would have the chance to exact his revenge. It all started with killing a dog and taking its den. Chapter 178 The Angler. Wen Xilan, male, 32 years old. A reporter for Aurora Daily. He wrote 184 articles during his 3 years of employment. But only 22 were successfully published. No wife, no children. His parents passed away 5 years ago. He lives alone in a 12-square-meter room in the South City. He doesn't smoke or drink, has no bad habits, and no hobbies. He changes assistants most frequently, and often goes to the hospital. The hospital? Chen Ling's expression was a bit strange as he looked at the information sent by the thugs. He suddenly recalled Wen Xilan's practiced movements when he was beaten yesterday, and instantly understood why he frequently went to the hospital. With his stubborn and reckless determination to uncover the truth, his salary was probably all spent on treating injuries. Hearing Chen Ling muttering to himself, Xu Muyan, who was across from him, put down his newspaper and asked, puzzled, "Why are you collecting this information?" "To find a new identity." "A new identity?" Xu Muyan looked thoughtfully at the paper in his hand. "You mean, a reporter?" "In this city, besides the enforcers, there's no quicker way to obtain information than through media freedom," Chen Ling said calmly, tossing the document onto the table. "Especially this Wen Xilan. He wrote nearly 200 articles in 3 years, but only 20-something were published. What about the content of those that weren't published? Too many people in this city want to kill him because he possesses too many secrets. And I am very interested in the secrets he holds." Xu Muyan raised an eyebrow, seemingly intrigued. While media freedom is effective, being a reporter isn't something one can just become. Under the control of those unseen hands, the profession of a reporter can be said to be extremely lucrative. Who knows how many people in Aurora City are eyeing these positions? You just arrived in Aurora City, with no prior experience or background. How will you approach this Wen Xilan? By swapping faces? No need for such trouble. Chen Ling picked up the half-rimmed glasses from the table and put them on, a faint smile gracing his young, refined face. Wen Xilan's character is too upright, and this is one of his weaknesses. Gaining his trust is simple. All it takes is a small performance to make him useful to me. Ellipsis. In front of the hospital. "How much are these fruits?" A Cheng, the assistant, stopped at the stall. "Small fruit baskets are 20. Large ones are 50. And those exquisite fruit baskets with packaging over there are 120. The boss said leisurely without looking up. A Cheng frowned slightly. He glanced at the exquisite fruit baskets, then pointed to a few scattered, unwanted apples in the corner. "What about those?" "Those? If you want those, take them for 5 copper coins." "I'll take them, and could you tie them up with some nice ribbons?" The boss shot him a glance, mumbled something under his breath, but still packed the apples and handed them to a Cheng. who then carried the fruit towards the hospital behind him. Cheng skillfully navigated the bustling corridor and pushed open a ward door. "Mr. Wen, how are you?" Before Cheng could finish his sentence, he saw that the bed in the ward was empty. He froze for a moment, about to turn back to confirm the room number, when a voice slowly emerged from under the bed. "It's Cheng, come in." Wen Xiaolin, covered in bandages, crawled out from the dark, cramped space under the bed. He quickly waved his hand. "Quick, close the door." Oh. Cheng quickly closed the door, shutting out the noise from the corridor, and asked, puzzled, "Mr. Wen, what were you doing under the bed?" "Too many people are targeting me recently, so I have to be careful everywhere. Otherwise, how do you think I've survived until now?" Wen Xiaolin dusted off his hands and sat back on the hospital bed. "And I always feel like someone's been watching me lately." "Mr. Wen, are you thinking too much? No one's watching us." "No, I trust my intuition. And have you forgotten? Those few manuscripts went missing too strangely recently. Maybe I really did uncover someone's weak spot. The more critical the moment, the more careful we must be." As Wen Xiaolin spoke, he got up and walked in front of Cheng. He saw the fruit tied with exquisite ribbons in Cheng's arms and said with emotion, "Cheng, you've spent money again." "What are you talking about? My salary is all subsidized by you, Mr. Wen, so buying a fruit basket is only right." Cheng smiled, took an apple from the fruit basket, wiped it on his sleeve, and handed it to Wen Xiaolin, then frowned. "I didn't notice when I bought it. Why is this apple a bit rotten?" "Mr. Wen, wait for me, I'll go reason with the vendor." "It's fine, I'm not particular," Wen Xiaolin said, stopping Cheng, who was about to turn away. "My injuries are almost healed. Let's get discharged." "Okay," Cheng nodded. Wen Xiaolin put on his clothes and followed Cheng out of the ward. Just as they reached the hospital entrance, his peripheral vision caught something, and he stopped. At the hospital entrance, a familiar figure in a brown coat and half-rimmed glasses stood before a white coats, holding a document bag, earnestly explaining something. "Oh?" Cheng also saw the person and exclaimed in surprise. "Mr. Wen, isn't that the passerby who helped us yesterday? What a coincidence." Wen Xiaolin's eyes also lit up as he looked at Chen Ling in the distance. After Chen Ling spoke earnestly for a while, the doctor shook his head, replied a few words, and then turned to leave. The figure in the brown coat stood alone at the hospital entrance, silent for a long time, then let out a long sigh. Seeing this, Wen Xiaolin immediately walked forward and called out to him. "Excuse me." Chen Ling paused. The black spectacle chain shifted slightly with his face as he looked at Wen Xiaolin approaching, a hint of surprise appearing in his cool, melancholic eyes. "Do you still remember me? We met yesterday on the West City Outer Ring Road." Chen Ling nodded slightly. "Is there something I can help you with?" "I am Wen Xiaolin, a reporter for Aurora Daily. I know this might be a bit abrupt, but perhaps we could find a place to sit down and talk." Wen Xiaolin said seriously, "Our newspaper recently started a Seeking True Goodness and Beauty column, and we regularly feature brave citizens." Seeing Chen Ling's somewhat strange expression, Wen Xiaolin added, "If you appear in the newspaper for your act of bravery, I imagine it would make your job search easier." Chen Ling asked in surprise, "How did you know I'm looking for a job?" "It's written on your document bag." Chen Ling looked down and saw that his document bag indeed had his name, contact address, and target position written on it. "All right, but I hope the interview can be soon. I might not have much time. After all, I have another hospital interview this afternoon." Chen Ling smiled politely. Chapter 179, Kidnapping and Interrogation. "So, you are Mr. Lin Yan?" "Yes." "Your job? Oh no. What was your previous job?" "A caregiver. Before that, I also learned Sanda." "A caregiver? At which hospital?" "Not a hospital, but a private clinic. Do you know Dr. Chu Muyan?" "In a coffee shop opposite the hospital." Chen Ling sat on the sofa opposite Wen Xiaolin and Cheng, unhurriedly pushing up his glasses, looking like a highly educated and kind scholar. "Is that the legendary Dr. Chu?" Wen Xiaolin raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I know him, a colleague of mine interviewed him. Since you were Dr. Chu's caregiver, why do you still need to apply for a job at a hospital?" A complex look flashed in Chen Ling's eyes. "I have some personal reasons." Seeing this, Wen Xiaolin tactfully did not press further. but changed the subject. Do you know those survivors from the 3rd district? No, I don't know them. Then your intervention yesterday was purely an act of bravery? You could say that. I just happened to see it and found that reporter a bit disgusting. Chen Ling smiled. After all, not all reporters are as righteous as you. Hearing this, Wen Xiaolan's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm righteous? How do you determine that? Just by your open black lens bracket, righteous iron fist, close black lens bracket. Chen Ling thought to himself. You stood up for those refugees. So you naturally wouldn't be a bad person. As Chen Ling spoke, the waiter brought over 3 cups of coffee. He gently held the cup handle and took a sip. Wen Xiaolan and a Cheng opposite him also took a few sips and put their cups down. There's one more thing I'm curious about. You knocked out several of Zhou Shuqing's teeth with one punch yesterday. So you seem quite strong. You also just said you learned Sanda? Wen Xiaolan blinked, asking seriously, if you had fought those hooligans yesterday, how many could you have taken on? Hearing this question, Chen Ling's mouth twitched slightly. From Wen Xiaolan's expression, this seemed to be the topic he was most interested in. A Cheng's expression beside him was also a bit strange. He sized up Chen Ling. Chen Ling didn't appear to have obvious muscles. He estimated Chen Ling was probably at a similar level to himself. A Cheng saw Chen Ling slightly open his mouth, as if about to say something. But the next moment, his vision began to darken, and his consciousness uncontrollably sank as if into a deep sea. At the same time, a weak voice came from the side. Damn it, we've fallen for it. Thump. Their vision plunged into complete darkness. Ellipsis. After an unknown amount of time, a low rumbling sound came from nearby. Buzz. It was like some large machinery starting up, gears meshing and emitting a beast-like growl, making one's heart tremble. Amidst this clamor, Wen Xiaolan slowly opened his eyes. His vision was still completely dark. A black cloth bag had been placed over his head. His eyes could only perceive a faint glimmer of light through the gaps in the fibers. And the hot air he exhaled swirled inside the bag, giving him a burning sense of suffocation. He tried to remove the bag, but his hands were tightly locked, the clanging of iron chains drowned out by the mechanical roar. Damn it, was there something in the coffee? Wen Xiaolan thought to himself. Who is targeting me? Constellation Commerce Association? White Swan Charity Foundation? Enforcement Officer Lu Sonling? Qianao? Nandong Wei? Or someone even higher up? Is it Chang Zan? Or that person? At that moment, countless names flashed through Wen Xiaolan's mind. He counted for more than 10 seconds and still hadn't finished. At the same time, a Cheng's weak voice came from the side. Mr. Wen? Mr. Wen, are you there? I'm here, Wen Xiaolan immediately responded. Are you alright? I'm alright. Wen Xiaolan seemed to have thought of something, his expression changing. Damn it, Lin Yan isn't involved too, is he? Cough, 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 cough. No sooner had Wen Xiaolan finished speaking than a series of coughs came from his left, followed by Chen Ling's voice. Mr. Wen, where is this? How did we end up here? Chen Ling's voice was a little flustered, but overall still calm, not as panicked and distraught as Wen Xiaolan had imagined. A sense of guilt surged in Wen Xiaolan's heart. Whoever kidnapped them, it must have been for him. And Chen Ling was only dragged into it for an interview, stepping into someone else's trap with him. He shouldn't be here. You can take me, but let Lin Yan go. He was dragged into this by me. He's innocent. Wen Xiaolan took a deep breath and shouted. Amidst the humming of the gears, a voice slowly spoke from the front. Wen Xiaolan, I remember we warned you. It was a man's voice, as cold as an iceberg floating in the frozen sea. The moment Wen Xiaolan heard this voice, his heart trembled, and his brain started working again. You're from the White Swan Charity Foundation? No, that's not right. You're from Changzan? As expected of our great reporter. Mr. Wen, you've really offended quite a few people. The voice drew closer to him, almost whispering into his ear. But you still ignored our warning. Do you know how many people's fates are tied to that matter? Is it something a small reporter like you can investigate? Hearing this, Wen Xiaolan seemed to have realized something and said with certainty. The Hand of Salvation Plan. I know now, you're from Tan Xin. A Cheng beside him trembled slightly. Ha ha. The voice neither affirmed nor denied, but gradually moved away. A moment later, a cold gun muzzle pressed against Wen Xiaolan's forehead. I'll give you one last chance. Where did you hide everything? I don't know what you're talking about. After guessing the other party's origin, Wen Xiaolin instead calmed down and replied indifferently. If you have the guts, kill me. I know that our great reporter, Mr. Wen, isn't afraid of death, but I wonder if your assistant is as tough? As he spoke, the voice moved in front of a Cheng and said coldly. Tell me, where did he hide the things? I don't know. A Cheng's voice trembled slightly. Alright, then you can go first. The sound of a bullet being chambered rang out. Just then, a Cheng's pupils suddenly constricted. No, you can't kill me. A Cheng immediately spoke. Brother, this is a misunderstanding. I was ordered by Officer Chu to secretly watch Wen Xiaolin, and all those articles and evidence about the Hand of Salvation plan. I stole them yesterday and put them in the designated location. Didn't you? Didn't you receive them? As soon as these words came out, the person holding the gun was visibly stunned. Wen Xiaolin was also stunned. In the vast space, only the low hum of the machinery rumbled on. Chapter 180, Escape. A Cheng. After a long while, Wen Xiaolin finally came to his senses, his voice barely concealing his shock. You're one of Tan Xin's people? Wen Xiaolin never expected that this assistant, who had been with him for several months, was actually sent by the enforcement officer. During this time, a Cheng's performance was perfect, and he seemed to respect Wen Xiaolin greatly. Even when those articles and evidence went missing, Wen Xiaolin never suspected a Cheng. Now, hearing a Cheng reveal his identity, Wen Xiaolin's mind went blank. Anger and confusion surged in his heart, and he roared in a low voice. So, your orphan background, your resume, everything you said during the interview, it was all fake? Of course, it was fake. A Cheng took a deep breath. Officer Chu had already figured out your personality. Everything about me was fabricated for you. He was certain you would choose me. And I too, would do what I had to do, leaving you no reason to dismiss me. The Hand of Salvation is something you absolutely cannot touch, no matter what else you investigate. He only sent me to keep an eye on you and obstruct your investigation. That is already very merciful. Otherwise, you would have died hundreds of times over. Wen Xiaolin's face beneath the cloth sack was deathly pale. Enough. The long silent voice sounded again. Someone, take these two to the back room first. I need to speak with him alone. Wen Xiaolin tried to say something more, but a piece of cloth was shoved into his mouth, and then his entire body was pressed down by a pair of strong hands, slowly moving him in a certain direction in the darkness. He was led through many twists and turns, unsure how long he walked, until he was finally locked onto a hard object. As the person's footsteps receded, there was a sound of chains struggling beside him, followed by the sound of something being spit out. Mr. Wen, are you all right? Wen Xiaolin didn't expect Chen Ling to be able to spit out the cloth sack. He immediately struggled with his chains, conveying his position to Chen Ling through sound. The distance between them seemed not far. After the other party's chains clanked, Wen Xiaolin immediately felt the cloth sack in his mouth being yanked hard, restoring his ability to speak. Lin Yan, you got rid of the chains? Wen Xiaolin asked in shock. No, I bit it with my mouth. It's just within my reach. Chen Ling's voice came from in front. The person who escorted me didn't seem to stuff the cloth sack in tightly, so I spit it out after struggling a few times. Can you touch my chains with your hand? No, we must be locked to two different pillars. I can't reach. Wen Xiaolin's heart sank to the bottom. He looked at the darkness before him, his voice full of guilt. I'm sorry. It's all my fault for getting you involved. They're after me. It's done, so there's nothing to apologize for. It's better to think about how to get out first. Chen Ling's voice was very calm. Wen Xiaolin gave a bitter laugh. Now we're locked up, and our eyes are covered. How can we get out? Chen Ling didn't speak, merely tried to struggle with the chains twice, making clanking sounds. What are you doing? Do you remember the sounds from earlier? This should be some kind of warehouse or factory, temporarily used by them as a place to kidnap us. Maybe there's something useful nearby. Reminded by Chen Ling, Wen Xiaolin immediately reacted, his bound hands beginning to grope on the ground in a small area. As he groped, Wen Xiaolin was secretly astonished. This Lin Yan's psychological fortitude was indeed strong. At this point, not only was he not panicking, but he could maintain absolute calmness. Just this level of mental fortitude surpassed most people. Nothing here, Chen Ling said regretfully. At the same time, Wen Xiaolin's fingertips touched something cold. He immediately brightened. There's something behind me. It's very hard, like a metal part. A part? Chen Ling immediately asked. Can it pry open the chains? No, it's too big and too heavy. Chen Ling pondered for a moment. Try throwing it to me. Wen Xiaolin could only rely on the sound of Chen Ling's voice to grit his teeth and throw the part in his hand. It clanged twice on the ground and stopped somewhere. How is it? Can you get it? Wen Xiaolin wasn't very confident in his aim. Yes. Chen Ling's end produced sounds of chains colliding with the part. The chains aren't handcuffs, there isn't absolutely no gap. Perhaps I can try. You can pry it open? Wen Xiaolin's eyes lit up. Chen Ling didn't answer. He took a deep breath, followed by a series of metallic clashes and painful grunts. Hearing this sound, Wen Xiaolin frowned and immediately spoke. Lin Yan, are you all right? Clang. 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 Chen Ling still didn't answer, but kept striking with the part, accompanied by muffled grunts of pain. A series of clanking sounds came from beside him, followed by heavy breathing. Lin Yan, you broke free? Wen Xiaolin heard the sound of chains falling to the ground and exclaimed with joy. Chen Ling weakly hummed in affirmation, just about to walk towards him, when a voice sounded from the doorway. I wonder where that sound came from. Trying to escape while our boss is interrogating? It was a sharp, harsh voice. The moment this voice sounded, Wen Xiaolin's heart sank. Before he could say anything, a whistling punch swept past him. You. After a brief sound of flesh meeting fist, the harsh voice abruptly ceased, as if a heavy object had fallen to the ground with a thud. Chen Ling fumbled around on him for a bit, then walked behind Wen Xiaolin and unlocked the chains connecting his wrists to the pillar. Wen Xiaolin said in surprise. You dealt with him? Dealt with him, watch out. Wen Xiaolin was about to reach up and remove the black cloth sack from his head when Chen Ling pressed his head down with one hand, directly forcing him to the ground. The next moment, the sound of a blade cutting through the air rang out, almost grazing Wen Xiaolin's ear. Wen Xiaolin had no idea what was happening, only bending down with Chen Ling's force. Continuous sounds of fighting erupted, accompanied by several different curses. And then he was pulled by Chen Ling, rushing rapidly in a certain direction. What happened? In the chaos, Wen Xiaolin was completely dragged by Chen Ling, his vision pitch black. Along the way, many people seemed to flash past him, but none managed to get close to his body. With the world spinning, he couldn't distinguish any direction, only letting Chen Ling pull him over a low wall, and then sprint rapidly into the distance. After running for an unknown amount of time, Chen Ling finally stopped, panting heavily. Wen Xiaolin almost stumbled to the ground. He staggered and sat on the ground, trembling as he removed the black cloth sack from his head. A bloody figure covered in knife wounds stood weakly before him. His left hand was unnaturally twisted, as if it had been smashed and broken by something. Chen Ling wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with one hand and spoke hoarsely. Mr. Wen, are you all right?